Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. In the last one we did a lot more legendary hunting across the area, completing the main 3 Reggies in the process, and now we're gonna go explore the Sea Mauville, which replaced the abandoned ship from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Slogan 1, say good morning, don't bring Pokemon to your workplace, always arrive on time, always stay late, lay your life on the line in safety checks. Take joint responsibility for teamwork, obey your superior's orders absolutely, maintain top quality, give up your sanity, worship and praise the founder. Don't expect time off before you retire. No, do you think? Just work unceasingly. Well, clearly this place had a very healthy working environment. Oh, God. So while this place did replace the abandoned ship, it has effectively the same general setup. Not only is there a section you need to dive in order to actively complete the main reason you want to be here, but there's rooms that are locked that have numbers on them. You need to find keys that match those rooms and unlock them in a very specific order. And if you actually investigate a lot of the background details, you can actually find a good bit of lore about the background of this area. For instance, over in room 2, which we'll be opening up later, there's a file that is incomplete in 2 different ways, depending on whether or not you're playing Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. But when combined says, Devon's Secret Investigation Report. The development on new energy turned out to be true. The energy that uses Pokemon's bioenergy is called Infinity Energy. Investigation report on Watson. A series of actions related to the cancellation of the new Mauville project turned out to be true. I recommend prompt disciplinary action against him as a traitor to our group. Doc Team E Leader Operative Group. There's also things like a moldy card that actively shouts out that Stern used to be an employee here, which actively ties in to an old note you can find in a different room. When they talk a little bit about the closing of this area, namely, the date of closing has been decided. I can't say thank you enough to Stern, who invited us to a shipyard when we could have been left adrift. Doc, who's done a dirty job, and I can both start with a clean slate. The only way I can repay him is to support his business with our skills. Before I get back to that, we actually, while we're diving here, want to go down the stairs here, as this is where we can actually find the scanner that helper for Stern was looking for at the end of last part. It's right here, faintly glimmering in the water. A little bit annoying you have to find it like that, but it's ultimately a pretty quick trip to grab that all the same. With that said, we're not going to take this back to him yet. I want to take care of the rest of this area first. This entire area comes out to just be a bunch of lore about a really shady company that Mauville ultimately was, considering they were researching Infinity Energy, which, if you will know, Gen 6's main plot shows they were into probably some really dark stuff. On top of the fact you can find notes from Takao Cosmo, who, if that name sounds familiar, that's the professor from Falarbor Town, so that shows how long ago this was all going down as well. I didn't read all the dialogue around here because, frankly, some of it's in places I didn't remember to search, and it's a bit late in the LP to go back and re-record it. You feel as though you're being watched. Save before you check the bookshelf here, by the way. The file folder holds a stack of ragged papers. Official statement of apology. I, Izo Kapmo, am respond for the loss of the odd keystone. Donate by the Orb mine. The rest is too damaged to make out. It feels as though you're being watched. The reason I recommend you say before checking this out is that after investigating it and entering any menu while looking at it, upon exiting the menu, you're gonna find a little surprise. Hello? Surprise encounter with an odd keystone, otherwise known as the Gen 4 mythic, I guess, technically, Pokemon Spirit Tomb. Ghost Dark type, meaning until Gen 6 introduced the Fairy type, this had no weaknesses, but it's immune to normal fighting and Psychic. Spirit Tomb is an incredibly defensive Pokemon on that aspect alone, but when you throw in its also high defense and attack stats, this makes for a really good Pokemon to use in a lot of circumstances with a good moveset. It's not very fast and doesn't have that high of an HP stat, but with what it has going on otherwise, it doesn't need that. Ability-wise, you can either have Pressure, which we talked about, or Infiltrator, so that makes it even better. This is a great Pokemon. With that said, it's usually a real pain in the ass to catch or find in any of the games it's in. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire is probably the most straightforward way to find one of these, since you just need to access this room and then do what we just did. So worth noting, the note that was talking about this odd keystone / Spirit Tomb brought up a specific name, albeit it was cut off. The name you can actively learn from a different note here in the Sea Mauville. It's talking about a Rhizo Cosmo. That last name probably sounds familiar because that is the father of Professor Cosmo from Falarbor, and there's actually a series of notes you can find from Professor Cosmo as a kid in one of the other rooms. Which is a really depressing series of notes to read because you really get to see, okay, This company is clearly keeping this father away from home way too much. The father and mother are fighting a lot and all that. It's just a really harrowing series of notes. Spiritomb, the forbidden Pokémon. It was bound to a fissure and an odd keystone as punishment for misdeeds 500 years ago. Since I don't showcase every single note in the area, I really recommend you go on the Bulbapedia page for this area to read the full series, because it gets kind of depressing. There's actually a notebook you can also read in a different area over in Mauville Hills. Hey, little kid over there! I came because my uncle told me there are extraordinary treasures in this abandoned building. Don't you know anything about them? Well, how would you know? But if you learned anything, tell me, kid. Understand? I'm going to ignore you now. This room has a note relevant to what we want to do here. Oh, a high skinny doll. Isn't it cute? I remember when these were all the rage. But I wonder why it's here. Wasn't this an office? Well, if you actively read the notes to Raizo Cosmo in the one room, you'll know that Professor Cosmo actively sent that to him. So it's a bit interesting that it's still here. Huh. Perhaps the most interesting note, though, is the notebook I brought a moment ago. You can also read over in Apartment 11, specifically in Mauville Hills. It says, the damage caused by the cancellation of the new Mauville project has been catastrophic. As a member of the management, much of the blame and debts will fall upon me. But that'll be little consolation to the employees working under me who will lose their livelihoods. I couldn't do a thing for them. I'm a man with no power. Protecting nature and Pokemon and the environment, it's great as an idea. It's a fine ideal to aspire to. And Watson isn't a great man for dreaming of it all. But cruel reality and the organization that I must try to preserve have dashed those dreams. I couldn't do a thing for him. I'm a man with no power. This is the last page with writing on it. Other pages have been torn out. So yeah, that guy at the Mauville Hills is, pretty complicit in what happened here, to put it lightly. Like I said earlier in the LP, I believe, Hoenn on the Game Boy Advance is where you can really start to see the seeds of them kind of putting a lot of little lore bits together for the Pokemon world at large and building a lot more out of it. But especially Sinnoh Beyond went really hard at it. And for as many things as they took out or didn't bring back from Emerald 4, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, they do add a little touch, nods, and references to other things in the series that do make it worth a play if you are interested in the overall lore and world that this series has built up over the years. Because there is a lot of just general little touches here and again, little references here and again, and all that are really neat. Either way, from a child over in the top right corner of the main room, you found the key to room 1, which is where we are now. In here in that little cabinet in the back, we can find the key to room 2, which is down here. This is where the little key quest of sorts begins here, where you're just finding one little piece that leads you to the next room and then to the next. Ooh, a revive. Thank you. Girls, how did you get in here? This room was locked. How in the world did you get in? I locked the door. All right, you want this? Take it. So what were you two doing in here? I'm teaching this girl how hard it is to be a trainer. Sure you were. Sure you were. I'll believe that. So room 6 is across the way, so we do need to dive back and forth, and just because we don't need to see it anymore because we've already gotten the item down there for now, I am jump cutting past the dive sequences just to save on like 15, 20 seconds at a time, really. The thing I could closest compare the Sea Mauville to in modern contexts is that it's now the Hoenn equivalent to the Pokemon Mansion on Cinnabar Island in Kanto, or the old Chateau in Sinnoh. For as minor of a journey as these can be in the main campaign, they're usually some of my favorite parts of the individual games, which makes it really sad that we didn't really have anything like this for a little bit there, because I can't remember something like this in Gen 8, albeit it has been a while, outside of playing the DLC recently on stream. I think the closest we've had something of this tier in recent stuff is just everything surrounding Area Zero in Gen 9. But then again, it's like that's a major focus of that game, which is what really makes Gen 9 a little bit refreshing in its own ways, despite its technical misgivings that have largely been fixed, especially in the Switch 2 patch. Like, there's just so much lore and story that they're actively starting to lean into telling again, and I'm really hoping that they use that and pay it off with a decent remake of Gen 5, but hope for the best, expect the worst is my mindset on that at the moment, I guess is a way to put it. This area also does a better job than the Abandoned Ship in one regard, where it's a better cap on what is generally a good theme in Hoenn, where because of the land versus sea thing, and especially them talking about balancing that with humanity, there's a whole lot about environmentalism in Gen 3 in that regard, which I really do appreciate, given that this is effectively an oil rig that wasn't exactly doing oil rig things, which kind of sounds like that one, I think it was a Sega Saturn game, Deep Fear, I think was something about that line. It also looks like a certain captain is a little bit involved here. I guess thinking about it, though, especially in Gen 4, 5, 6, and 7, less so Gen 8, of course, Pokemon's most interesting storytelling is always the stuff they're vaguer and more imply than directly state, which I guess is just a thing with storytelling in general, where if you're vague but tell enough details about it all the same, you can really let a person's imagination soar, and the theory crafting and inter-community talking about it can just be a lot more of an interesting experience. By the way, we found the storage key in that room, so now we can access this place. That looks like a lot of treasure. Hey, would you look at that? Somebody got it open. Well, if it ain't that kid from before, looks like you done good, huh? You's the one who opened this? What in the world's this all? There's nuggets all over. And there's nuggets over there. This whole joint's packed with nuggets, ain't it? No wonder the capo was looking for this place. What a punch in the gob. Good work, you kid. Now scram. You found it. Mr. Izo! Of course I did, boss. We hit the jackpot. Ah, my Takao. So this is where you've been. You must have been so lonely here. I'm sorry. Come on, it's time to go home. Hold up, Uncle! Hey, kid. Looks like this is your lucky day. Looks like all this shine is yours. Keep your nose clean. Well, the implications of that are depressing. So in here we got a whole bunch of items, namely a lot of nuggets and big nuggets, but there is notably the TM for Ice Beam, as well as a Mega Stone in here. Ice Beam, I'd say, is probably the most approachable generalized Ice-type move with a 10% chance, I believe, of freezing the opponent. Meanwhile, the Mega Stone there is the more interesting reward here, ultimately, for me. This is the Beedrillite. That allows you to Mega Evolve the Gen 1 Bug Poison type Beedrill into Mega Beedrill, which I might as well talk about both versions here. Standard Beedrill, for as early as you can get it to evolve in any of the games you can grab it, is a decently fast physical attacker with an okay special defense stat on top of that. Ability-wise, it can either have Swarm or Snapper, which we've talked about both, but they kind of get outclassed pretty quickly stat-wise just because they're an early game bug type. But Mega Beedrill is a radically different story in that regard. But first, let's talk to Stern's helper here. Ah, is that the scanner? Huh, do you think you can deliver it to Captain Stern? I still have things I want to inspect while I'm here. So I guess we're heading back to Slateport. So, Mega Beedrill. It not only gains a whopping 60 attack and 70 speed at the cost of 30 special attack, it also gains adaptability for its ability, where it just increases its stab potential, which is really good for its moveset. Oh, that device you have there is the scanner from Sea Mauville. That could really make our expeditions really take off. Won't you do me a favor and let me take that scanner off your hands? Sure. Yes, thanks. This will help our research a lot. Take this bell as a token of my appreciation for your generosity. And for doing all that, we get the title bell here in Alpha Sapphire. That bell figures in old legends from the Johto region. It's pretty nice to have. When I was working on Sea Mauville, I had a lad working under me who was from those parts, and he gave me that. If I remember rightly, his family passed down some special dance style. It was only for the girls, so as a lad, he came here looking for work. He always kept that bell on his person, but sometimes when we were up top at Sea Mauville, that bell would ring. It would almost seem to glow. Sure was mysterious, all right. I've held onto it all these years, but I'd be happy if it would serve you some use now. Notably, instead of the title bell over in Omega Ruby, you instead get the clear bell, which if you remember anything about my Soul Silver Let's Play, you probably have a good idea what that's for. Before we head back to Sea Mauville and take care of that, though, it's time for us to wrap up the stuff here at the Trick House. The sixth and final challenge he has for us here at Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire is fine. It's one I don't like going through myself. That's because I just generally don't like this type of mechanic in these games. In specific, this is where we're going to deal with the rotating arrow tiles from, say, the rocket base in Gen 1. You step on one, you are sent rotating in that direction, and you need to puzzle out which way is the way you need to go in order not only to get the items around here, but also to reach the password and ultimately the exit. On my practice run of this area, I was here for about 15 minutes just getting lost. Though I will say, it's not the worst version of this type of mechanic. I do prefer the teleport tiles from Silphco or the Team Aqua Magma base to this. And thankfully, they just generally use this less and less as the series goes on, probably because they realize the teleport tiles are more interesting or things like that. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this room. I'm much more a fan of the equivalent puzzle over in Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, which is them reusing the 4-tree gym rotating door mechanic in a few more interesting ways. This is actively closer to what the 7th puzzle was in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Although I think in terms of complexity, it's closer to the one from Ruby and Sapphire, which ultimately you can also see more of at a given time because of the different aspect ratios. But at the same time, it's also a sprite size thing. As for what the 8th and final puzzle was in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, it was effectively an ice slide puzzle where you're on polished tiles and you slip and slide across them. I think that's the more interesting final puzzle between this and that, because the ice-type sliding puzzles, as annoying as they can be in some games, you can at least sit there and try to process through thinking out the solution, versus this where it's effectively trial and error trying to find the correct arrow to step on, which trial and error can work for puzzles, especially when it's quick trial and error, when it's potentially waiting 20 seconds at a time to figure out and get back to where you need to be. That's where it can get tedious and annoying. Shell ore stables, by the way, again, just more lava cookies, effectively. Nice to have them. I might use some of them later on. I don't quite remember. But hey, I have them all, and that's all I really care about. Since we have the password now, it's actively a pretty quick trip over to the very north here for the exit to this puzzle, where we finally finish off the trick house once and for all. There is a part of me that wishes they would bring a trick house kind of idea back, because I think there's interesting things you could do with this, even in a more modern Pokemon landscape. Maybe little platforming puzzles where you're maybe limited in the case of like Scarlet and Violet to one of the Herba Mystica abilities at a time, but that would probably take a lot of setup. Ah, you've made it this far. You're sharp. It took me all night placing arrows. You even exceed me in greatness. Possibly. What should I do? My fountain of ideas is tricks have run dry. Perhaps it's time I toured the country on a quest to devise new tricks. I hate to admit defeat, but you bested me. Still, you must have been reeled in by my charisma for you to visit me again and again. Yes, you must have. But that has nothing to do with my losing. In recognition of the friendship between you, the Driven, and the genius that is myself, I demand you take this keepsake. All that for a tent for your base. I'm leaving on a journey of self-discovery, a quest in search of new tricks. I wish you will one day visit and entertain me again. And now, farewell. But we're not technically done here yet. There's one more scene you can see if you leave and re-enter the building, where he's just here again, except he's not, because this is one of the Mecha Dolls. I finished locking the doors. I'm going to follow Trickmaster. Then farewell. They didn't need to do that. I think it's funny they did. For right now, though, we're back at the Sea Mauville, because now that we have either the Title Bell or the Clear Bell, there's one more thing we can do here. With that said, what you can do here depends on which version you're playing and thus which bell you have. With that said, in order to do either thing, we need to get onto the Sea Mauville itself. In specific, though, if you have the Clear Bell, you're here for a lot less time. Also, I might as well actively pay to be here because, well, I like doing that kind of stuff. I make sure I follow the rules. If you have the Clear Bell over in Omega Ruby, there will be a Hoopa Gate right here where you can fight a Legendary. But since I'm playing Alpha Sapphire, I instead need to come to the depths. The Title Bell in your bag starts glowing faintly. Save before you check either of these, of course, because it's time for our next Legendaries, plural, technically. Let's see what floats in the water. After getting the Title Bell at the bottom of the Sea Mauville lies good old Lugia. Psychic flying type, so it's weak to rock, ghost, electric, ice, and dark, but immune to ground. Lugia is an incredible tank with a high HP, defense, and special defense stat that's also got some good speed to back it up. And while it's not the best at attacking, it's gonna wreck some shit no matter what, frankly. Ability-wise, in most cases, it's going to have pressure, but if you get the hidden ability, you get multi-scale, which will reduce its damage when it's at full HP, making it even better tank. If you're playing Omega Ruby and you have the clear bell, though, if you check the top of the Sea Mauville at the end of that crane, you'll instead find the other Gen 2 legendary Ho-Oh. Fire flying type, so it's weak to rock, water, and electric, but immune to ground. Notably, rock is a 4x weakness. Whereas Lugia is an amazing defender, Ho-Oh is an amazing mixed attacker. Great physical attack stat, great special attack stat, and also an amazing special defense stat on top of that. On top of the fact, it's still got a good HP stat. Its weaknesses are either its speed or physical defense, but even then, weakness is in air quotes, because again, legendaries seldom have a stat lower than 90 in most instances. Technically speaking, I do prefer Ho-Oh in terms of a use case, even with that 4x weakness. But in terms of aesthetics and all that, I've always preferred Lugia outside of his legendary battle theme here from Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which is threatening, but nowhere near as interesting a melody to listen to as Ho-Oh's. Lugia was definitely a bit of a rebel when it came to catching him compared to some of the other legendaries. I think I was here for about 7.5 minutes, but at the end of the day, that's still really quick compared to some other legendaries in the series. Heck, I think in my Soul Silver Let's Play, I think I was working on a specific legendary in Cerulean City for better part of an hour and a half or so. Lugia, the diving Pokemon. Lugia's wings pack devastating power. A light fluttering of its wings can blow apart regular houses. As a result, this Pokemon chooses to live out of sight deep under the sea. I will always love you, Lugia. Watching Pokemon 2000 at the tender age of 3 will probably do that to me, though. In fact, I think technically speaking, Pokemon 2000 was my first exposure to the franchise as a whole via the daughter of a friend of my mother when I was growing up, back before we moved up north even. So at this point, since we have Lugia done now, I want to take care of some other things. But first off, I want to showcase a Mirage Forest. This is one of the several randomly spawning in Mirage spots that change on the daily. Technically speaking, we've already seen one of these via Crescent Isle. But as for the standard versions of them, there's I believe forests, caves, and mountains. Each of them has a couple of different maps that have usually some tiles of grass you can run into Pokemon that are hard to find except in that area, a visible item, and usually a hidden item somewhere too. Trying to find all of these is something I decided not to do in the LP because there are some TMs that are exclusive to them, but I figured I'd show off the ones I found along the way just to showcase them. For instance, in this case, we got the legendary Cry themselves, Cricketune. A Gen 4 pure bug type, so it's weak to flying, rock, and fire. Cricketune, for as early as you can find it in Gen 4 itself, is a decent physical attacker, but for as late as we are in this game, it's just a funny Pokemon with a funny cry. I've always enjoyed the design of this Pokemon in specific, though. Ability-wise, you can either have Swarm or Technician. Both are fine abilities, I just ultimately prefer Technician, even though I don't use it too much. What Technician does is if a Pokemon with that ability uses a move with a power that's less than 60, the move's power is increased by 50%. So a move with 50 power is effectively a move with 75 power. Which does go a long way to power up early game bug types like this that can have that ability. Just this one isn't to my exact tastes. Right about now, Future Me should be listing the potential locations of the various Mirage spots, but just to note, say, the Pokemon variety you can find on some of them. Just to list the Pokemon you can find on Mirage Islands specifically. Depending on the one, you can find Venomoths, Zatus, Zebstricas, Darmanitons, Tangalas, Larvestas, Persians, Porygons, Peruglis, Aldinos, Dittos, Munas, Maractuses. Breaking Rock Smash rocks, you can find things like Gravelers and Binacles. But also Rock Smashing rocks on any of the various Mirage spots can find you fossils from other generations, namely the Gen 1 fossils, the Gen 4 fossils, the Gen 5 fossils, and I think maybe the Gen 6 fossils. Future Me is probably also going to list the potential Pokemon you can find on the other variants that aren't just Mirage Islands, just because listing all of them out in commentary would probably take a little bit too long. I do showcase what Mirage spots I find across the LP, but I went into this LP with the mental note of, I probably won't show them all off, because due to their random nature, potentially waiting days upon days for them all to show up just didn't really feel worth it to me. Though worth noting, if you're playing this on your own time in some form and you have friends you can connect to via the PSS, whatever Mirage spots they have on a day you connect to them will also show up in your world, so you can have more than one at a time. Heck, that's technically the most consistent way to get Crescent Isle to show up, as random as that still is. Next up in my continued efforts of completely ignoring the main plot and doing what I want to do around the region, I want to head back to Pacific Log Town. Because now that we've found and caught all 3 Reggies, A specific NPC here has a line of dialogue or two worth noting. In specific, it's the girl here in this house. 6 dots open 3 doors. Grandpa used to say that, and I was wondering what he meant. I had no idea there was some secret to meeting some special Pokemon. Tell me another story too. I wonder if this has some hidden meaning too. Grandpa used to say that this huge Pokemon sometimes visits our region. He told me that it comes to visit this iceberg kind of Pokemon. I can only think of one kind of iceberg Pokemon. So, I'm not exactly sure how you were supposed to figure this out from that line of dialogue, unless there's a line of dialogue I forgot to record where you talk to her with the Reggies in your party. But in order to nab the next legendary we're going after, you need to have all 3 Reggies we've caught thus far in your party. Regice must have a nickname, which is why I named it Regis earlier. On top of that, it must be holding some sort of ice-related item. Castelia Cone, Never Melt Ice, Icy Rock, Icicle Plate, Snowballs, things like that. And then, we need to head to the room where we fought and caught Regice. Worth noting, this will only work during the morning or the day. It will not work at all during the night, for some reason. On top of that, you need to do all that after having caught or defeated Groudon or Kyogre in either version, as you need the National Pokedex for this to work. Upon doing so and entering the exact space where we actively fought Regice, a little surprise is going to be waiting for us. Well, little is a little bit of an understatement. God, I love that battle intro. This is the Trio Master for the Reggies, Regigigas, a normal type, so it's weak to fighting, immune to Ghost. Regigigas has incredible HP, absurd attack, great defense, okay special attack, and great special defense and speed, at the cost of its absurd ability. It has the ability Slow Start, which halves its user's attack and speed during the first 5 turns of battle, which gets reset if you swap it out. So unless you're planning to have this thing survive 5 turns doing not too much, or use a skill swap strategy that requires a lot of planning around, Regigigas is a Pokemon I love a lot about in concept, but in execution I basically never use. Which is a shame, honestly, because this Pokemon's a really cool design. It's got a lot of really cool lore tied to it we'll learn about in Platinum. It's just that it's a Pokemon that they really planned around the ability of to make it really ineffective in battle. There's also the whole, one of the major ways to get that Pokemon prior to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, causing it to be level 1. Regigigas, the colossal Pokemon. There is an enduring legend that states this Pokemon towed continents with ropes. With that, we have time for one more legendary, I'd say. In specific, I'm heading onto my Lati with Lugia in my overall party, but if you're playing Omega Ruby, Ho-Oh will also work for this. Having either of them in your party causes the trackless forest here to spawn. Like a lot of the other set Mirage spots, what you find here depends on the 3DS's system time and date. Cold air, like the north wind, sweeps over the area. Given the Pokemon tied to this place, you can probably make a pretty good estimation on what Pokemon can spawn in here dependent on what time you access it. But just in case, I recommend saving all the same. Let's put our hand in the hole. Within this specific Mirage spot, you can find the 3 legendary beasts from Johto. In specific here, we got Suicune. Pure water type, so it's weak to grass and electric. Suicune is a really good defender with a generally good HP, defense, and special defense stat, but it's no slouch when it comes to its special attacks either with the moves that it gets. Ability-wise, it can either have pressure or water absorb as its hidden ability in this generation. Gen 7 would give it Inner Focus instead. As for how the trackless forest itself works, the Pokemon that you find in the Hoopa Hoop depends on what minute you find it within a given hour. To use, say, 5 p.m. as an example, because that's about what time it is right now, between 5 and 5:19, you'll find Raikou. Between 5:20 and 5:39, you'll find Entei. Between 5:40 and 5:59, which is around the time I would have recorded this, we of course find Suicune. The thing I've always found kind of disappointing about this specific area is that, as we've seen, they generally play the music in question for the legendaries you find in these Mirage spots, like we heard the Soul Silver battle theme for Lugia earlier, and the Ho-Oh theme plays if you fight Ho-Oh. For some reason, they don't play the Heart Gold Soul Silver variant themes for these legendary beasts. They just use the one song that's the Gold Silver Crystal variant, which I get kind of why, because it's one song that's tied to all three, but hearing the three unique themes would have been kind of neat too. Suicune, the Aurora Pokémon. Suicune embodies the compassion of a pure spring of water and runs across the land with gracefulness. This Pokemon has the power to purify dirty water. Neat! But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 28, we once again continue adventuring around Hoenn and finding what legendaries we can. See you guys then.